The gunshot that echoed through Sweetwater, Texas on that scorching July afternoon in 1882, would change everything. But when Clara Morgan stumbled into the sheriff's office claiming she had witnessed the murder of cattle baron Edmund Hayes through the window of the abandoned mill, not a single soul in town believed her, except for the quiet cowboy who had just ridden in that morning looking for work. Clara's hands trembled as she tried to explain what she had seen to Sheriff Dobson, whose weathered face remained skeptical from the moment she opened her mouth. She had been collecting wildflowers near the old mill on the edge of town, a place most people avoided because it had fallen into disrepair after the original owner went bankrupt 5 years prior. Through the broken window, she had witnessed 2 men arguing with Edmund Hayes, the wealthiest rancher in 3 counties. The argument had escalated quickly, and one of the men, wearing a distinctive silver belt buckle shaped like a longhorn, had pulled his revolver and shot Hayes square in the chest. Clara had hidden behind a stack of old crates, terrified they would discover her presence, and when the men finally left, dragging Hayes's body with them, she had run straight to town. "Miss Morgan, that is quite a tale," Sheriff Dobson said, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. "But Edmund Hayes is not dead. I just saw him yesterday and he is perfectly fine. He is supposed to be in San Antonio on business this week, but there has been no report of any trouble." "I know what I saw," Clara insisted, her voice rising with desperation. "They killed him. I watched it happen. The man with the silver longhorn buckle shot him, and another man helped drag him away. They were talking about covering it up, about making sure nobody would find the body." Sheriff Dobson exchanged glances with his deputy, a young man named Charlie who looked at Clara with barely concealed amusement. "Miss Morgan, you have quite an imagination. Perhaps the heat got to you. It has been over 100 degrees all week." Clara felt her chest tighten with frustration. She had always been honest, always told the truth, and yet here she was being dismissed like a child telling fairy tales. "I am not making this up. Why would I lie about something like this?" "That is what we would like to know," Deputy Charlie said, his tone condescending. "Maybe you are looking for attention. Maybe you are trying to cause trouble for Mr. Hayes because your father owed him money before he died." The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth to it. Her father had indeed owed Edmund Hayes money, and when he died 2 years ago, Clara had struggled to pay off the debt. But that had nothing to do with what she witnessed today. "My father's debts are paid. This has nothing to do with that. I am telling you the truth." But Sheriff Dobson had already dismissed her, waving his hand as if shooing away a persistent fly. "Go home, Miss Morgan. Get some rest. Drink some water. And stop spreading wild stories that could damage a man's reputation." Clara left the sheriff's office feeling as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She walked down the main street of Sweetwater, and already she could feel the eyes on her. News traveled fast in a small town, and within an hour, everyone seemed to know about her claims. Women whispered behind their hands as she passed. Men shook their heads. Even Mrs. Patterson, who ran the general store and had always been kind to Clara, gave her a look of pity mixed with disapproval. She was standing outside the boarding house where she rented a small room, trying to gather herself, when she heard a voice behind her. "I believe you." Clara turned to find a man she had never seen before. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore typical cowboy attire, dusty from travel, and his hat was pulled low enough to shade his face from the brutal sun. But what struck her most was the sincerity in his expression. There was no mockery, no doubt, just steady belief. "What?" she asked, certain she had misheard. "I said I believe you," he repeated, stepping closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "I heard what happened at the sheriff's office. The whole town is talking about it, and I believe you saw what you said you saw." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You do not even know me. Why would you believe me when nobody else does?" The cowboy removed his hat, revealing more of his face. He had a strong jaw, a small scar above his left eyebrow, and an honest look about him that made Clara want to trust him immediately. "Name is James Sullivan. I just rode into town this morning looking for ranch work, and the reason I believe you is simple. I saw something too." Her heart began to race. "What did you see?" "I was camping about 5 miles west of here last night," James explained, his voice low so that passers-by would not overhear. "Around midnight, I heard horses. 3 men rode past my camp and they were in a hurry. 2 of them were dragging something heavy wrapped in canvas. At the time, I figured it was supplies or maybe a wounded animal. But now that I hear your story, I think it might have been a body." They were heading toward the ravine near Copper Creek, the place where the ground is soft enough to dig without too much trouble. Clara's breath caught. "Did you see their faces?" "It was dark, but I saw one man had a silver belt buckle that caught the moonlight, shaped like a longhorn." That detail, the specific detail she had mentioned to the sheriff, confirmed everything. Clara felt vindicated but also terrified. "We have to tell the sheriff. If you saw them too, he will have to believe us." James shook his head slowly. "I tried. I went to the sheriff's office right after I heard the commotion about your story. I told him what I saw, and he dismissed me just like he dismissed you. Said I was a drifter trying to stir up trouble, that there was no evidence of any crime, and that I should move along if I knew what was good for me." "So what do we do?" Clara asked, feeling the weight of helplessness settle over her again. James met her eyes and she saw determination there. "We find the body ourselves, we get proof, and then they will have to believe us." It was a dangerous plan. If the men who killed Edmund Hayes discovered that someone was investigating, they would not hesitate to kill again. But what choice did they have? Clara nodded slowly. "When do we start?" "Tonight," James said. "After dark. Meet me behind the livery stable at 10 o'clock. Bring warm clothes. It gets cold in the ravine at night, even in summer." Clara agreed, and as James walked away, she felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. For the first time since witnessing the murder, she did not feel completely alone. The rest of the day dragged by with excruciating slowness. Clara tried to go about her normal routine, doing laundry and mending clothes to earn a bit of money, but her mind kept returning to what she had witnessed and to the cowboy who believed her. James Sullivan. She repeated his name in her mind, finding comfort in the fact that someone, anyone, was on her side. As evening approached, Clara noticed that the townspeople's whispers had grown louder. She overheard a group of men at the saloon saying that she was crazy, that she had always been odd since her father died, that she was probably trying to extort money from the Hayes family. The words cut deep, but she forced herself to stay focused. Tonight, she and James would find the proof they needed. At precisely 10 o'clock, Clara slipped out of her boarding house wearing dark clothes and carrying a small lantern. She made her way through the shadows to the livery stable, where James was already waiting with 2 horses saddled and ready. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice, as if he had worried she might change her mind. "I told you I would," Clara replied, taking the reins of the smaller horse, a gentle mare with a white star on her forehead. They rode out of town quietly, avoiding the main roads and sticking to the less traveled paths. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to see by without needing to use their lanterns and risk being spotted. James led the way confidently, as if he had memorized the terrain during his short time in the area. "How long have you been traveling?" Clara asked after they had been riding for about 20 minutes. The silence had been comfortable, but she wanted to know more about this man who had appeared in her life at exactly the right moment. "About 2 years," James answered, his voice carrying easily in the quiet night. "I worked on my family's ranch in Montana until my father died. My older brother inherited everything, and we did not see eye to eye on how things should be run, so I left. Been moving from place to place, taking work where I can find it." "Do you miss it? Your home, I mean." James was quiet for a moment before answering. "I miss what it used to be. I miss my father, but the place itself. No, not anymore. It stopped feeling like home the day my brother told me I was not welcome to have a say in the family business. Clara heard the pain beneath his words and understood it well. She had lost her own sense of home when her father died. I am sorry, that must have been difficult. It was, James admitted. But it taught me something important. Home is not always a place. Sometimes it is a feeling or a person or a purpose. I have been searching for that ever since I left. His words resonated with Clara in a way she had not expected. She too had been searching for something, though she had not been able to name it until now. I know what you mean. Since my father died, I have felt like I am just existing, not really living. Going through the motions but not feeling connected to anything. Maybe that is about to change, James said, glancing over at her with a slight smile. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we do not understand why at the time. They reached the ravine near Copper Creek about an hour later. The area was remote and desolate, with rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation. James dismounted and helped Clara down from her horse, his hands steady and respectful. They tied the horses to a sturdy bush and lit their lanterns, keeping the flames low. The men I saw were heading toward that area, James said, pointing to a section of the ravine where the ground looked disturbed. If they buried him, it would be somewhere over there. They walked carefully, mindful of loose rocks and uneven terrain. Clara's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. What if they were wrong? What if there was no body and she really had imagined everything? But then she remembered the look on Edmund Hayes's face as he fell, the sound of the gunshot, the casual way the men had discussed covering up the murder. It had been real. James knelt down near a patch of ground that looked recently disturbed. He pulled out a small folding shovel from his pack and began to dig carefully. Clara held the lantern steady, casting light over the area. They worked in tense silence for several minutes, and then James's shovel hit something solid. There is something here, he said quietly. They dug more carefully now, brushing away dirt with their hands. And then they saw it, the edge of a canvas tarp, exactly what James had seen the men carrying. With trembling hands, they pulled back the canvas to reveal the face of Edmund Hayes, his eyes closed, a bullet wound visible in his chest. Clara had to turn away, bile rising in her throat. It is him, James said, his voice grim. You were right. They killed him and buried him out here. Clara took several deep breaths, trying to steady herself. They had found the proof, but now what? They needed to get the sheriff out here, needed to make him see the truth. We have to go back to town. We have to make them listen. James covered the body again, marking the spot so they could find it easily. We will, but we have to be smart about this. The men who did this are still out there, and they are clearly connected enough to have the sheriff dismiss your story so easily. We need to figure out who they are and why they killed Hayes. As they rode back toward town, Clara's mind raced. Who would want Edmund Hayes dead? He had been wealthy and powerful, which meant he likely had enemies. But who would be bold enough to murder him in broad daylight? And why had the sheriff been so quick to dismiss her story? Was he involved somehow? James, she said suddenly, what if the sheriff is part of this? What if he knows about the murder and is helping to cover it up? James nodded slowly. I had the same thought, which means we cannot go to him with this information. We need to take it to someone else, someone with more authority. The federal marshal, Clara suggested. There is one who comes through the area every few months, but I do not know when he is due back. We will find out, James said with determination. In the meantime, we need to be careful. If the people behind this realize we know the truth, we will be in danger. They arrived back in Sweetwater just before dawn, exhausted but resolute. James walked Clara to her boarding house and they stood in the shadows, reluctant to part ways. Thank you, Clara said softly, for believing me, for helping me. I do not know what I would have done if you had not come along. James reached out and gently touched her arm, the gesture both comforting and intimate. You would have figured it out. You are stronger than you think, Clara Morgan. The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. She looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. There was attraction there, yes, but also respect and admiration. In a world where everyone else had dismissed her, James had seen her worth from the very beginning. "I should go inside," she said, though she made no move to leave. "Tomorrow we will figure out our next steps," James promised. "But for now, get some rest, and Clara, be careful. Do not talk to anyone about what we found, not until we have a solid plan." She nodded and finally forced herself to go inside. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she touched her arm where James's hand had been, still feeling the warmth of his touch. The next few days were tense. Clara went about her daily routines, all while feeling the weight of what she knew pressing down on her. The townspeople continued to whisper about her, calling her a liar and a troublemaker. Mrs. Patterson banned her from the general store, saying her presence was bad for business. Even the landlady at the boarding house suggested that Clara might want to find accommodation elsewhere. But through it all, James remained her constant. He took a job at the ranch on the outskirts of town, working with the horses, but he made time to meet with Clara every evening. They would walk along the creek outside of town, far from prying eyes, and discuss their investigation. James had been asking careful questions around town, trying to learn more about Edmund Hayes and who might have wanted him dead. "I found out something interesting," James told her one evening as they sat on a large flat rock overlooking the water. Hayes was in the process of selling a large portion of his land. Apparently, there is a railroad company interested in running tracks through this area, and Hayes's land is right in the path they want to take. The deal would have made him even richer, but it also would have displaced several smaller ranchers whose land borders his. Clara processed this information. "So someone might have killed him to stop the sale." "That is my theory," James said. "If Hayes dies before the sale goes through, the land would go to his heirs and they might not be interested in selling. Or the whole deal might fall apart entirely, which would protect the smaller ranchers." "But who specifically?" Clara asked. "Who had the most to lose?" James pulled out a small notebook where he had been keeping track of information. "There are 3 ranchers whose land would be most affected: Thomas Wheeler, Frank Donovan, and Samuel Pritchard. All 3 have been struggling financially. All 3 would lose everything if the railroad forced them out." Clara felt a chill despite the warm evening air. "We need to find out which one of them has a silver longhorn belt buckle." Over the next week, James made discreet inquiries and observations. He learned that Thomas Wheeler had recently lost his son to illness and was drowning in grief and debt. Frank Donovan was known for his hot temper, but was also known to be honest to a fault. That left Samuel Pritchard, a man who had always seemed friendly on the surface but whom James discovered had a reputation for being ruthless in business dealings. "I saw Pritchard at the saloon last night," James told Clara during one of their evening meetings. "He was wearing a silver belt buckle shaped like a longhorn." Clara's heart began to race. "That is him. He is one of the men who killed Hayes." "There is more," James continued. "I overheard him talking to Deputy Charlie. They seemed very familiar with each other, like old friends, and Pritchard gave Charlie a stack of money, said it was for keeping the peace." The pieces were falling into place. Deputy Charlie was being paid off by Pritchard, which explained why the sheriff's office had been so quick to dismiss Clara's claims. But they still needed concrete proof that would hold up in a court of law. "We need to make Pritchard confess," Clara said, though she had no idea how they would accomplish that. James was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the creek. Then he turned to Clara with an intense look. "I have an idea, but it is risky. We would need to make Pritchard think that there is another witness, someone besides you and me, someone who has evidence that could hang him." "How would we do that?" Clara asked. "We let it slip that Hayes kept a journal and that the journal is hidden somewhere on his property," James explained. "We start a rumor that the journal contains information about all of Hayes's business dealings, including who was threatening him. If Pritchard believes such a journal exists, he will try to find it and destroy it. We can follow him, and when he breaks into Hayes's property looking for it, we will have evidence of his guilt." It was a dangerous plan, but Clara could not think of a better alternative. "All right, how do we start the rumor?" They worked carefully over the next several days, planting the story in strategic places. James mentioned the journal to the ranch hands he worked with, saying he had heard the Hayes family talking about it. Clara made a point of asking at the boarding house if anyone knew whether Hayes kept personal records, saying she had heard something about a journal. Within days, the rumor had spread throughout Sweetwater. During this time, Clara found herself growing closer to James in ways that went beyond their shared mission. She learned that he loved poetry and often read by firelight when he was camping alone. He learned that she had always dreamed of being a teacher, but could never afford the training. They shared their hopes and fears, their memories and dreams, and somewhere along the way, friendship deepened into something more. One evening, as they sat by the creek watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, James took Clara's hand in his. "When this is all over," he said quietly, "I want to stay in Sweetwater. I want to build something here, put down roots, but only if you want that too." Clara's heart swelled with emotion. "James, I barely know you. We have only known each other for a few weeks." "I know," he said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "But sometimes you just know when something is right. From the moment I saw you standing outside that boarding house, looking so brave and so alone, I knew you were someone special, someone I wanted to know better. And every day since then has only confirmed it." Clara felt tears gathering in her eyes, but these were happy tears. "I feel the same way. You are the first person in so long who has seen me, really seen me and believed in me. I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." James pulled her closer and she let herself lean against him, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had not felt since before her father died. "You will not lose me, Clara. I promise you that. We are going to solve this together, clear your name, and then we are going to build a life together. If you will have me." "I will," she whispered, and then he was kissing her, gentle and reverent, and she kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. Their moment of peace was short-lived. 2 days later, just as they had hoped, Samuel Pritchard took the bait. James had been keeping watch on Pritchard's movements, and late one night, he saw Pritchard and another man ride out toward the Hayes ranch. James quickly found Clara, and together they followed at a safe distance. The Hayes ranch was dark and empty. The family had not returned from San Antonio yet, still unaware that Edmund was dead. Pritchard and his companion, whom Clara recognized as a ranch hand named Billy Moss, broke into the main house through a back window. James and Clara waited outside, positioned where they could see but would not be easily spotted. They watched as lantern light moved from room to room inside the house. Pritchard and Billy were clearly searching for something, growing more frustrated as their search proved fruitless. "There is no journal," Billy said, his voice carrying through the open window. "Maybe it was just a rumor." "Someone knows something," Pritchard hissed. "That Morgan woman saw us. I should have killed her when I had the chance instead of just assuming nobody would believe her." Clara's blood ran cold hearing him confirm what she had witnessed. James put a protective arm around her, holding her steady. "We need to take care of her," Billy said nervously. "And that cowboy who has been asking questions around town, Sullivan, I think his name is, they are getting too close." "I will handle it," Pritchard growled. "But first, we need to make sure there is nothing here that can connect us to Hayes's death." James and Clara exchanged glances. They had heard enough. Pritchard had essentially confessed to the murder and was now planning to kill them. But they needed more than just their word against his. They needed witnesses who would be believed. "Stay here," James whispered to Clara. "I am going to ride to the neighboring ranch and get help. We need credible witnesses to hear what Pritchard is saying." "No," Clara said firmly, gripping his arm. "We stay together. We will both go." James looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in Clara's eyes and nodded. They moved quickly and quietly back to their horses and rode hard to the neighboring property. owned by a rancher named George McAllister, who was known for his integrity and fairness. They pounded on McAllister's door, waking him and his wife. At first, McAllister was angry about being disturbed in the middle of the night, but when James and Clara explained the situation, his demeanor changed. "You are saying Sam Pritchard killed Edmund Hayes?" McAllister asked, his face grave. "We found the body where he buried it," Clara said. "And right now, he is at the Hayes Ranch admitting to the murder and planning to kill us to keep us quiet. Please, Mr. McAllister, we need someone people will believe to hear his confession." McAllister did not hesitate. He grabbed his rifle and woke his 2 adult sons. Within minutes, they were all riding back to the Hayes Ranch. When they arrived, Pritchard and Billy were just coming out of the house, still arguing about what to do. "Samuel Pritchard," McAllister called out, his voice ringing with authority, "you are going to stay right where you are." Pritchard spun around, his hand going to his gun, but he froze when he saw McAllister's rifle pointed at him and McAllister's sons flanking him with their own weapons. "What is the meaning of this, George?" Pritchard demanded, trying to sound innocent. "The meaning is that these 2 young people have some serious accusations against you," McAllister said. "And I just heard you and Billy discussing how you need to take care of them. Sounded an awful lot like you were planning murder." Pritchard's face went pale, then red with anger. "You are going to take the word of a lying girl and a drifter over mine. I am a respected rancher in this community." "A respected rancher who is breaking into his neighbor's house in the middle of the night," McAllister pointed out. "And as for Miss Morgan being a liar, I am beginning to think she has been telling the truth all along." "Where is Edmund Hayes, Sam?" "How should I know? He is in San Antonio." "No, he is not," James said, stepping forward. "He is buried in a shallow grave near Copper Creek. We found his body." "He was shot, just like Clara said." Billy Moss, who had been silent up until this point, suddenly broke. "It was not supposed to happen like this," he said, his voice shaking. "Sam said we were just going to scare Hayes, make him reconsider the railroad deal. But then Hayes refused, said nothing would stop him from selling, and Sam just pulled his gun and shot him. I did not know he was going to do it. I swear I did not." "Shut up, you fool," Pritchard shouted, but it was too late. Billy had confessed in front of witnesses. McAllister's sons moved forward and disarmed both Pritchard and Billy. "We are taking you both to the sheriff," McAllister said. "And this time, there will not be any dismissing the evidence." When they arrived at the sheriff's office with their prisoners, Sheriff Dobson was shocked to see George McAllister, one of the most respected men in the county, demanding justice. McAllister laid out everything he had heard and witnessed, and he insisted that they ride out to Copper Creek immediately to verify the location of Edmund Hayes's body. At first, Sheriff Dobson tried to resist, but when Deputy Charlie attempted to help Pritchard, McAllister turned on him too. "You have been taking bribes, Charlie. I heard Sam mention paying you off. You are as guilty as he is." Faced with multiple witnesses and undeniable evidence, Sheriff Dobson had no choice but to arrest Pritchard, Billy, and his own deputy. They rode out to Copper Creek at first light, and when they uncovered Edmund Hayes's body exactly where Clara and James had said it would be, Sheriff Dobson's face went white. "Miss Morgan," he said quietly, unable to meet her eyes, "I owe you an apology, a profound apology. I should have listened to you from the beginning." Clara stood tall, her hand clasped in James's. "Yes, you should have, but thank you for saying so." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Pritchard and Billy were formally charged with murder, and Deputy Charlie was charged as an accessory after the fact. The trial was swift, with multiple witnesses testifying to what they had heard and seen. Billy Moss turned state's evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence, providing detailed testimony about how Pritchard had planned and executed the murder. During the trial, the whole town learned the truth about what had happened. Clara's name was cleared, and the people who had called her a liar began to approach her with shamefaced apologies. Some she accepted graciously, others she ignored entirely. She had learned a valuable lesson about who deserved her forgiveness and who did not. Throughout it all, James remained by her side. He testified about what he had seen the night of the murder and how he had helped Clara find the evidence. The people of Sweetwater began to see him not as a drifter, but as a hero who had stood up for justice when no one else would. After the trial concluded with Pritchard being sentenced to hang and Billy receiving a prison sentence, Clara and James finally had time to breathe and think about their future. James had saved up money from his work at the ranch, and Clara had been putting aside every cent she could earn from her sewing and laundry work. One evening, James took Clara on a ride to a beautiful piece of land just outside of Sweetwater. It had a creek running through it, plenty of grazing land for cattle, and a small grove of cottonwood trees that provided shade. "What do you think?" James asked, watching Clara's face as she took in the view. "It is beautiful," she said honestly. "Whose land is this?" James smiled, looking almost shy. "It is ours, if you want it to be. I put a down payment on it last week. I know I should have asked you first, but I wanted to surprise you. I thought we could build a house here, start a ranch, make this our home." Clara's eyes filled with tears and she threw her arms around James's neck. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I want this. I want all of it. I want to build a life with you." James spun her around, both of them grinning like children. Then he set her down gently and reached into his pocket, pulling out a simple gold ring. "Clara Morgan, you are the strongest, bravest, most honest woman I have ever met. From the moment I met you, I knew you were special. Will you marry me?" Clara looked at the ring, then at James's hopeful face, and felt her heart swell with love and certainty. "Yes, James Sullivan, I will marry you." They were married a month later in a small ceremony at the church in Sweetwater. George McAllister and his wife attended, as did several other families who had come to respect and admire Clara and James. Even Sheriff Dobson came, still trying to make amends for his initial dismissal of Clara's testimony. The couple spent their first year of marriage building their ranch from the ground up. James proved to be an excellent rancher with a natural way with horses and cattle. Clara discovered she had a talent for managing the business side of things, keeping their books balanced and negotiating fair prices for their stock. They worked hard, side by side, and their ranch began to thrive. In the spring of 1884, Clara gave birth to their first child, a healthy baby boy they named Samuel, after James's father. James was a devoted father from the moment he held his son, and watching him cradle the tiny baby in his strong, capable hands made Clara fall in love with him all over again. Their family grew over the years. 2 years after Samuel was born, they welcomed a daughter named Grace, who had her mother's determination and her father's kind eyes. 3 years after that came another son, Edmund, named in honor of the man whose death had brought Clara and James together, though in a tragic way. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the area. But more than financial success, Clara and James built a home filled with love, laughter, and honesty. They taught their children the importance of standing up for the truth, even when it was difficult. They taught them that belief and trust were the foundations of any strong relationship. On warm summer evenings, when the children were finally asleep and the ranch was quiet, Clara and James would sit on the porch of the house they had built together, watching the sun set over their land. James would take Clara's hand, just as he had that evening by the creek when they first admitted their feelings for each other, and they would sit in comfortable silence, grateful for the journey that had brought them here. Do you ever think about that day? Clara asked one evening many years after the trial. "The day you first told me you believed me," James smiled, bringing her hand to his lips for a kiss, a gesture that had become their special ritual over the years. "I think about it all the time. It was the day my life really began. Everything before that was just me wandering, searching for something I could not name. But when I saw you standing there, so brave in the face of everyone's disbelief, I knew I had found what I was looking for." "What was that?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Purpose," James said simply. "Home, Love, you were all of those things, Clara, you still are. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple. Their children were healthy and happy. Their ranch was successful. Their love had only grown stronger with each passing year. The whole town had called her a liar once, but the cowboy had believed every word she said from the very start, and that belief had changed everything. "I love you, James Sullivan," Clara said softly. "I love you too, Clara Sullivan," James replied, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Today, tomorrow, and always." They sat together as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built a beautiful life together. The wildness of the West still existed around them, with its dangers and uncertainties, but here on their porch, surrounded by the land they had claimed and the family they had created, they had found peace. Their story became something of a legend in Sweetwater. People spoke of the woman who witnessed a murder and the cowboy who believed her when no one else would. They spoke of how love and truth had prevailed over lies and corruption. Young couples would point to Clara and James as an example of what partnership and faith in each other could build. As the years rolled on and the Wild West slowly became more civilized, with railroads crisscrossing the land and towns growing into cities, Clara and James remained constant. They watched their children grow up and start families of their own. Samuel became a lawyer, using his parents' story as inspiration to always fight for justice. Grace married a kind veterinarian and settled on a nearby ranch. Edmund became a teacher, fulfilling the dream his mother once had for herself. Clara and James grew old together, their hands becoming weathered and lined with age, but always clasped together. They faced droughts and hard winters, economic downturns and personal losses, but they faced everything together, just as they had faced that first terrible challenge when they barely knew each other. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were over 30 people present, all descendants or close friends of the couple who had started it all. As Clara and James stood together, surrounded by the family they had built and the life they had created, they looked at each other with the same love and belief that had sparked between them all those years ago. "Thank you," Clara whispered to James as they danced slowly to music played by one of their grandsons on a fiddle. "For what?" James asked, though his eyes were twinkling because he already knew. "For believing me," Clara said. "For seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. For loving me enough to fight for the truth." James pulled her closer, not caring that their children and grandchildren were watching with indulgent smiles. "Believing you was the easiest thing I ever did, Clara. Loving you was even easier. And I would do it all again, every single moment, if it meant ending up right here with you." They kissed then, two people who had been through fire and come out stronger, who had built something lasting and true in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. The whole town had called her a liar once, but the cowboy had believed every word she said from the very start, and that belief had been the beginning of everything beautiful in their lives. As the celebration continued around them, with children laughing and adults sharing stories, Clara and James Sullivan stood at the center of it all, living proof that truth and love could overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the best things in life begin with a single act of faith in another person. Their story, born in tragedy and skepticism, had become one of hope and enduring love, a testament to the power of believing in someone when the whole world says you should not. And there, on their land under the wide Texas sky, surrounded by the legacy they had built together, Clara and James Sullivan lived out their days in contentment and joy, their hearts forever intertwined, their story forever told as a reminder that true love begins with belief, and belief can change everything.